really interesting interview that Ben Norton Ben Norton of the Gray Zone interviews one of the children of the founders of the Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua. The pandemic shows neoliberalism doesn't work. Interview with Sandinista leader on 41st anniversary of Nicaragua's revolution. On the 41st anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution, the FSLN International Relations Secretary and son of the founder, Carlos Fonseca Terán, says the people of Nicaragua are successfully confronting the aggressions of imperialism. Managua, Nicaragua. July 19, 2020 was the 41st anniversary of the Sandinistas' revolution, a historical watershed moment in which Nicaraguans overthrew a U.S.-backed right-wing military dictatorship and inspired a wave of progressive movements across Latin America. It's pretty awesome and amazing, right? Today, the Sandinista National Liberation Front, Frente Sandinista de Liberación Nacional, or FSLN, in Spanish, is Nicaragua's democratically elected ruling party with a majority of seats in the government. The Gray Zone spoke with Carlos Fonseca Terán, the International Relations Secretary for the FSLN, and the son of the founder of the Sandinista Front, Carlos Fonseca Amador, who was executed by the former military dictatorship. Fonseca Terán discussed the legacy of the revolution, the gains made by the Sandinista government, how Nicaragua has confronted the COVID-19 pandemic, and the persistence of U.S. meddling today, which is not surprising given the socialist nature of the Sandinista revolution and how Nicaragua is currently governed by a socialist majority in government. He argues that the pandemic is evidence that the neoliberal model is unable to confront the great problems facing humanity. Yes, we see that day after day here in the United States. It is evident that only the popular and anti-hegemonic models are capable of meeting the needs and expectations of human beings. Ben Norton, what is the importance of this 41st anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution, particularly in the moment when there are many right-wing governments in Latin America and when there are threats of authoritarianism and fascism, countries like Bolivia with the right-wing military coup that's been aided and abetted by the U.S. and people like Elon Musk, Ecuador and Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. Carlos Fonseca Terán, the Sandinista Revolution is one of the three fundamental moments in the revolutionary struggle in our continent in which social change is oriented towards transitioning from capitalism to socialism. It's what we need in the US and worldwide in countries that haven't made that transition. The first of these was the Cuban Revolution, which initiated the area of armed struggle and guerrilla movements for national liberation to confront right-wing military dictatorships that were imposed by U.S. imperialism. The Sandinista Revolution, meanwhile, initiated the collapse of those military dictatorships, and then the Bolivarian Revolution, led by Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, initiated the area in which progressive and revolutionary movements had power in the majority of governments in our continent at the same time, which is amazing. The continued importance of these revolutionary processes is the strongest factor in the revolutionary movement in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is why U.S. imperialism prioritizes aggression against Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. We see that right now, targeting Venezuela with the sanctions, trying to support those ridiculous coup attempts by Juan Guaido and his U.S.-backed and Western-backed cronies. Same thing with Cuba and its interference in interventionist politics, which expresses itself in the blockade of Cuba, the economic aggression against Nicaragua, and the economic war on Venezuela. In particular, in the particular case of our socioeconomic and political model, like all models that are revolutionary, is fundamental base in popular power exercised in political and economic sphere. The expression of that politics is a citizen's power as an organized expression of popular protagonism in public affairs. People power, power to the people. The protagonism of social movements in the mechanisms for decision-making, the participation of social movement leaders in institutional spaces of the state, and the prominent presence of Sandinistas in these spaces defend the interests of the people. In the economic sphere, we are the country with the second highest level of socialization of the means of production in Latin America, only exceeded by Cuba. Some 52% of GDP in Nicaragua is produced by the popular sector of the economy. So that means that sector of the economy is directly benefiting the people, not multinational corporations or the capitalist owner oligarch class, like in the U.S. There have been countless social gains made in the second phase of the revolution, in which we have picked up and resumed huge transformations made in the first phase in the 1980s, but new historical circumstances on both a continental and a global level. We have a large number of social programs aimed at popular management of capital for social control of the economy, the reduction of poverty and social inequality, and the recovery of rights for the Nicaraguan people. I mean, literally, why would, unless you're some type of capitalist bootlicker confused about what actually socialism is, why would you not support that? Among the achievements that can be mentioned are the massive distribution of property deeds, the deprivatization of health and education, the reduction of poverty from 48.3% to 24.9%, and extreme poverty from 17.2 to 6.9%. Going from the fourth most unequal country in Latin America during the neoliberal era, we've become the fourth least unequal. I mean, goddamn, look at the progress. It's because they kicked out capitalism, they instituted socialism to make the country work for the people. That's what socialism is about. Jesus Christ. The reduction of infant mortality from 29 of each 1,000 live births to 11.4, which is pretty close to the U.S., I believe, and of malnutrition of 5-year-old children from 21.4 to 11.1%. The increase in health spending per capita from USD 32 to 70, the construction of 19 hospitals with 5 more in construction and 9 more planned, the reduction of literacy from 35 to 3%, and that had been reduced just before the US-backed Contra War in the 1980s, from 52 to 12%. Subsidies for transport, 6% of the budget constitutionally guaranteed for public universities, increase to the minimum wage for 13 years, 10 times higher than the increase during the 16 years of neoliberalism. Look at that. I mean, again, making the economy, making the society work for the people and not just the rich and the powerful. That is what socialism is about. Nicaragua is one of the countries with the most participation of women in public positions, which has increased from 15% to 64%, going from the 90th place to the 12th smallest gender gap in the world. That's freaking amazing. With legal protection for women against gender violence with the Law 779, with gender orientation included in social programs. This only shows some of the social achievements earned in this second phase of the revolution. Ben Norton. There's a lot of criticism of Nicaragua in the media, especially on the subject of coronavirus. President Daniel Ortega talked in a speech on the anniversary of the revolution on July 19th about the importance of the country's socialized health system. What do you have to say in response to criticism of the government's COVID-19 policy? Carlos Fonseca Terán. Our model of confronting the pandemic is suited to our reality and the specific characteristics of a revolutionary model. Our model could be described as one of balancing point and active confrontation of the pandemic. In our country, due to the particularities of our customs and custom of socialization of property and economic democratization in the society, there's not the same division between economy and life. The guiding principle of our model of confronting the pandemic is combining the best possible level of social distancing with the best possible functioning of the economy for life. As for the active confrontation of the pandemic, that consists of permanent mobilizations of the organized community to give guidance, identify possible cases of COVID-19, campaigns of vaccinations to prevent the collapse of the hospital system, raising immunity levels to have the smallest possible impact of COVID-19, create a health map for effective epidemiological monitoring, and all of the other objectives. All of this within the framework of maintaining the social programs, economic activity, and infrastructure projects. The method of confronting the pandemic is possible because of the high levels of popular organization, the revolutionary consciousness of our people thanks to the revolution, as well as the characteristics of our socio-economic and political model, along them a prevention-oriented community-based healthcare system that serves the people. The result is a mortality rate of 1.56 thousand for every 1,000 or 100,000 people. I mean, just imagine if we had people in the United States in power that talked like this, that governed like this, that had this type of ideology. I mean, the right wing has dedicated itself to boycotting the great efforts of our people and government under the leadership of Commander Daniel Ortega and the political leadership of the Sandinista National Liberation Front in the confrontation of the pandemic. The response has been a combination of calls for paralyzing the country and celebrating U.S. economic aggression against Nicaragua, spreading fake news about a supposed medical collapse to discourage people from going to hospitals and creating an environment of fear to impede our actions against the pandemic. The coup-mongering right wing so far as to predict that in April that by May there would be 23,000 deaths because of the pandemic, and according to its fraudulent calculations, there would be even as many deaths by suspected cases of COVID-19, by pneumonia of other causes. Even if it was true, we'd put far below many European countries in the United States, which is their model to follow, with all of its demagogy and incoherence out in the open. By the way, on this topic, it's important to think about on a global level as a revolutionary movement, a strategy of popular political struggle, pointing to the pandemic as evidence that the neoliberal model is unable to confront the great problems facing humanity, and in view of the crisis that the pandemic has caused in the economic and social spheres, that we would make it manifest in the political sphere in favor of the struggle for the popular movement. For their part, the popular and anti-hegemonic models seem stronger despite the attempts to the contrary by reactionary forces and imperialism, since it's easy to see the contrast in the mortality rates in the countries with neoliberal models, countries with alternative and anti-hegemonic models. It is evident that the only popular and anti-hegemonic models are capable of meeting the needs of expectations of human beings. It is evident that the imperialist politics that oppose human rights with continued blockades, aggression, and interventionist actions in the middle of a pandemic, along with the worsening of repression on the sectors that are protests against racism in the United States. Apparently, the pandemic froze the popular struggle, but what it is doing is creating even better conditions for this to continue until the popular classes can take power if they are able to articulate the struggle in the right way. What is the role of the U.S. government in Nicaragua, and what are the effects of the sanctions and other forms of U.S. interference in the internal affairs of the country? Carlos Fonseca, Terán. The interventionism of U.S. imperialism in our country through its history has as its principal expression 5 armed interventions, 3 of which are direct, 4 of which people have defeated. Today, that intervention continues and consists of economic and political aggression. Among the economic aggressors is the NICA Act, passed by the U.S. Congress, which prevents our country from getting loans from international financial institutions. There's also the Magnitsky Act, which blocks financial activity by state firms such as Albanza, Petronic, which were created to finance social programs that benefit the Nicaraguan people, as well as the normal activities of institutions like the National Police of Nicaragua. Meanwhile, the political aggressions are expressed in the intentions of the OAS. Basically, the OAS is controlled by the U.S., their puppet arm of imperialism. As we saw them trying to justify the coup in Bolivia, to use its Inter-American Democratic Charter against Nicaragua as a way to legitimize greater levels of interference and aggression against our national sovereignty. But once again, the people of Nicaragua are successfully confronting the aggression of imperialism and will continue moving forward in this revolutionary process, advancing from victory to victory. Wow, I mean, goddamn. Again, imagine, how much better off the United States would be right now if they had a socialist model like they have in Nicaragua, where instead of the neoliberal model that, pushes privatization and, profit over people, we wouldn't have 150,000 people dead. We would have universal health care. We would have UBI. We would have rent and mortgage cancellations. We wouldn't have, what has it been during this whole time? 50 million people out of jobs. It's disgusting. But again, that's capitalism. That's capitalism. That's why we need to transition towards socialism now. Peace, much love, all power to the people.